G'day everyone, Kate from the Narrate team here. This week we begin a new series entitled Stuff, in which we explore a principle that says our appetites are never fully or finally satisfied. Adam asks us some great questions coming into the new year on how best to frame our appetites and offers some helpful insight on managing the tensions created by them.
Obviously, we're starting a conversation called Stuff, and really what I'd like to explore this morning is it relates to our appetites. It just seems to me like it's a really strategic time of year to talk about appetites and how they work and kind of how they don't work. But our interest here isn't to get into the condemning, shaming kind of way. My goal isn't to get you to kind of take a prophetic hand to your Christmas traditions and make you feel poorly about the way you celebrated and all that. I think your visa statement's sufficient to do that. But in seriousness, like I don't know about you, but sometimes I hear people talk about like the luxuries that we have as Americans and some of the amenities that we have available to us and some of our traditions, and I understand that there's a place for challenging some of that, and sometimes I go, but I had no choice as to what country I was going to be born into and what time, and like, I didn't pick any of that. God did, and certainly that leaves us with some responsibility to navigate, and we're actually going to get at that in the last message in this series as we kind of talk about Ecuador and the globe and some of those different things. But this morning, and I hope what is a much more challenging but not condemning way, I just want to talk about your appetite. Namely, that I don't know that you've noticed this, but your appetite really only knows one word. It's the word more. And the tricky thing about appetites is whether it's a good appetite or a bad appetite, every appetite, whether it's to help people, whether it's to serve people, whether it's to help yourself, whether it's for money or whatever it is, all of them, they only know one word, and the word is more. Now, when we hear appetite, we often think of, we think of food, right? We think of hunger, but really we have a lot of appetite. Like you have an appetite for food and for sex, and I think there's more. There's food and there's sex and food and sex, and there's lots of... I just see the world through the perspective of a man. I'm really sorry. Like, I can't really. But if you're a single gal, like, let me give you some advice. Like, us guys are simple. Food, sex, sleep. Boom, we're good. Really? It's too far? I was proud of that one. You have an appetite to be loved, to be cherished. And this is the wife's chance to say, and that's different than sex, right? You have the appetite to matter. Many of you, especially, I feel like the Narrate community, like you have an appetite for progress. Like you're not the type of people that just like to sit around. You're not like the type of people that like to just see things stay static. You like to see things move forward, whether that's in your finances, or in your bank account, or whether that's in your own physical health, or your spirituality, or your emotional health, or your job, or where your job is, or what role you have in that job. Like you have an appetite to see things move forward. But see, this is where it gets tricky, because have you noticed that as soon as you accomplish the goal, as soon as you obtain that level, what happens? You want more. Many of you, especially those of you that are still aspiring to places of leadership and you don't know how exhausting it is, like you have an appetite for more responsibility. Some of you, it's the opposite, but we'll save that for a different message, because you're going like, you guys can have it. But like you have an appetite to have more and greater responsibility, and yet this doesn't start when we get to our professional lives. Like stop and think about what you went through in elementary school, or maybe you're a student today. Like you get to 5th grade, and what can you not wait for? To be in middle school, right? And then you're in 6th grade, and the moment you start 6th grade, what can you not wait for? To get out of middle school, because it's horrible, it's a bad time, but it's a great time too, but right, like it's just like, blah. And the moment you become a freshman, what do you want? To be an upperclassman? And the moment you become an upperclassman, what do you look forward to? Like getting out of their house and having your own house, going to college, and the moment you get to college, what can you not wait for? To move out of the dorms, to get to the place where you actually have a job, so you don't just have to eat ramen noodle all the time. To which some of you are going, wait a minute, I went to college, and that's why that's all I can eat is ramen noodle, like after college. Like that's where the expenses start. And many parents are going, yeah, me too. How does that work? See, we have this appetite for progress. We have this appetite for responsibility, but it just can't be satisfied. You have an appetite to win. You have an appetite for recognition, and sometimes that feels like a dirty, like bad appetite, and sometimes you just realize like that's okay, but no matter how much recognition you get, you want more of it. There's actually now clinical research being done in relationship to people's likes on Instagram and Facebook. and how there's now clinical forms of depression that come in when somebody has a habit of getting lots of likes in their posts and then that dips. Why? Because a like is a form of progress. And when that goes away, we don't know what to do with ourselves. So we have all these appetites, and that's really what I want to explore this morning, is that what they create in us is a tension. And what that tension comes from is the fact that your appetites are there and they're never going away. In fact, Andy Stanley is obviously one of my favorite thinkers and communicators, and I heard him give a message years ago at a conference in Atlanta on this subject, and I'm indebted to him this morning, and even in the way we're thinking about this series, because yes, we do make a habit of talking about money or stuff or something along those lines in January, because we just know that we respond to that and we need that and we want that. But this year we're going the direction of stuff. And he made 3 observations that when I heard them years ago and when I continue to hear them now, that I just think they're absolutely brilliant. First thing he says that we all need to know about our appetites is that God made them and sin distorts them. See, the thing about an appetite is God gave most of your appetites to you. Like you are a giant bundle of appetites, and that's not sin. In fact, if you just think of the way the creation story starts, the biblical story starts, God puts people in the middle of this garden, and it's not developed, and there isn't a lot of technology, and there isn't a whole lot going on. It's like he puts them in the middle of an endless pile of Legos and said, let's build something together. It all necessitates a people who are driven, who have appetite, who want to see progress. In fact, just to be fair, if you put a person here who has a ton of appetites and a person over here who has no appetites, which one has more problems? See, everybody who's married to one of these knows which one has the problems. Everyone who has a 17-year-old son or daughter who is over here and they don't have any appetites, they know who have the real problems. So appetites aren't bad, it's that they have to be managed. The second thing is this, that no appetite is ever fully or finally satisfied. And that, I think, is where the tension really begins to mount. Like no appetite, whatever your appetite is for. You know how people who win eating contests, you know how they prepare? They don't starve themselves. They gorge. See, the more you feed an appetite, the bigger it gets. So no appetite, no matter what it's for, they will never be fully and finally satisfied. Here's a piece of evidence to think about. How many times in the last 2 weeks did you put your fork down and say something like, I never need to eat again? Do that? Like that's kind of a Christmas tradition. 3 hours later, what were you doing? Opening the refrigerator. And if you have boys in your house who are anywhere from 3 to 17, it wasn't 3 hours, it was like 30 minutes. Like you're still washing the dishes. Can I have something to eat? No. Why? Because they cannot be fully and finally satisfied. And see, here's where we get ourselves into trouble. We get ourselves into trouble when we buy into this line of thinking that says there's some person, there's some experience, there's some item, there's some level of health that we'll reach, some level of finances that we'll have, that if our business gets to this size or our organization gets to this size, or if I just own some of these, or if I get to do more of this, or I have this much in my IRA, where we get ourselves in trouble is when we buy into this thinking that says when I get to this place, then I'll be able to rock back on my heels and go, I never need another thing. But it'll never happen. Because no appetite, whether it's to lead people into a relationship with Christ or to build your own bank account, no appetite will ever be fully and finally satisfied. Which leads us to this third thing, and that is this, that appetites, that they always whisper now, never later. They want it and they want it now, never later. And don't you think like we could just stop here, and wouldn't we have already explained most of your life? Wouldn't we have explained your friends' lives, the people that you admire, the people that you don't admire so much, the people who you've watched live these brilliant lives, the people who've made wrecks of their lives? Like it kind of explains it all, doesn't it? Because I think this is one of those isms, this is one of those truths that if we skip this, if we miss this, if we deny this, it doesn't matter what else we get right. Like our destination is predictable. Embarrassment, loss, destruction. That if we push back on this, if we allow ourselves to buy into the thinking that says a little more, 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 like we're toast. We're ruined. And so this morning what I want to do, because isn't that like lighthearted and like, hey, aren't you so glad you came to church this morning? Really what I want to do this morning is look back at a story that for some of you will be familiar and others of you will be quite obscure. But what I want to do is look at this story because it takes this point and makes it in some pretty dramatic fashion, I think. But before we skip to it, we're going to go back to Genesis 25, that there's a cultural phenomenon that was true of the world in that day, but not true in the world of our day, that I think it would do us well to just revisit for just a moment. It's the idea of the birthright. Because I don't know about you, but like I haven't been told that I have the birthright, or that I've not heard anybody that's like, hey, he gets everything because he has the birthright. Like, it's foreign to us. It was everyday commonplace in the world of Israel. And the idea behind the birthright, really the birthright was incredibly valuable for three reasons. First of all, it was valuable because with the birthright, you had incredible financial benefits. Because see, what the birthright said was the oldest born son, not the oldest born daughter. Sorry, ladies, take it up elsewhere. But God is, I don't want to get into gender stuff, but God's as progressive as it gets. But in this culture, it was still slow by our standards. But it was the firstborn son. And what happened at the father's death, at the reading of the will, was the firstborn son got 2 to 3 times, at minimum, what all the other brothers got. And in a culture that was mostly agricultural, not like we're dividing up gold and dollars, you're dividing up land. And so in many cases, the firstborn son got all of it, all the wealth, all the resource, every bit of it. Not because he was wiser, not because he was a better steward of stuff, not because he was a better farmer, but because he was born first. The second thing that the firstborn son got was power with relationship to authority. Because the firstborn son, he became the ruler of the family. That when there was a discussion to be had, there may or may not have been a discussion or a decision to be made. There may or may not have been a discussion. But either way, there wasn't a vote. There was a decision, and the brother would make that decision. And the third thing about the firstborn, and this one like messes with me and makes me uncomfortable, and I guess that's a good sign when the Bible makes you squirm, because it means that you're not just creating a God that you like. But what these guys understood very clearly was that the firstborn son had God's blessing with him in ways the others didn't. That God was present with the firstborn in ways the rest of the siblings would never get to benefit from. And that's kind of messy. But the point is, being firstborn was incredibly valuable. So now let's jump into Genesis 25. We're going to pick up in verse 29. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau, now, okay, let's pause there again, because Jacob and Esau, they're these twin brothers, right? And Esau, he's like the man's man, hairy and rugged, and like when the transmission goes out in the car, he fixes it with a screwdriver and a piece of duct tape, and when there's an animal that needs to be killed, he kills it with his bare hands. I mean, Esau is that kind of man's man, like golden boy of the father, never cooked anything, never washed anything, never sewed anything. He just like smells, and he's hairy, and he's dirty, but he's kind of the guy that you want on trips with you, because you know that if you get a flat tire, he'll turn a tire from a tree into a tire. And like that guy, right? That's Esau. Jacob is his brother, and he couldn't be more different. Jacob's, he's the mama's boy. Like, he likes to cook, and he likes to clean, and he likes to be inside. He doesn't like to be cold. He doesn't like to be hot. He doesn't like to be thirsty or hungry. That's Jacob. Maybe this will help. Esau drove a truck with a lift kit, and those testicle things hanging from the hitch. And you're like, that's Esau. And Jacob, he drove a Prius. Okay? Only saying that as one who would love to have a Prius. So that's Jacob and Esau. So once when Jacob was cooking some stew, because that's what Jacob did, Esau came in from the open country famished. Next slide. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. Now, another cultural thing that can be helpful as we kind of move further into this text. How many of you, well, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because that's bad, but most of you, I'm going to assume, had siblings. And whether you're a boy or a girl, what you can appreciate is that the oldest child, and here's what's unfolding here for Jacob and Esau, the oldest child almost never needs something from the younger siblings. You with me? Like whether we're talking about when they're 4 or when they're 14 or when they're 24, the oldest child, especially growing up, almost never has a need that they turn and look to their younger siblings for, because they go to school first, they read first, they have privileges first, they have a driver's license first, and sure, they might be disciplined a little more strict, but they get stuff earlier. They have money first, they have an iPad first, they have a computer first, they go to college first, they get all the firsts. But every once in a while, the younger sibling is needed. Right? Like every once in a while, the older sibling comes to the younger and says, I need something from you. And in that instance, the wise, cunning, crafty, intelligent younger sibling, they just say, hey, let's just pause here. Let's just take this in. Because I spent my whole life being bossed around by you and begging you to borrow your sweatshirt and begging you to a ride to the dance and begging you to not make me walk home from school. And like I've spent my whole life being told what to do. And here we are. And suddenly you need something from me. So let's negotiate that. You with me? Well, let's talk about that. Oh, you need to borrow some money. Huh? Oh, you need me to cover for you, do you? Oh, this is brilliant. And that's what Jacob's doing. Jacob's going, I've got the power. I don't ever have the power. Let's talk about the power. And listen to what Jacob says. And as you get inside that stream, you can appreciate his request. Jacob says this, first, sell me your birthright. Oh, that's pretty bold. Like I wanted a cup of stew, okay? Well, you don't ask me for stuff very often. How about your birthright? And the question is like, well, who in the world would trade something as valuable as a birthright for something as valuable as a cup of stew? Who would trade something that has so much future to it for something as temporary as a cup of stew? Who would trade something that is going to walk with you and be with you and you're going to benefit from it for the rest of your life, and your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids, they're all going to benefit from your possessing it? Who would trade all that for a cup of stew? And I'll tell you who would trade it all for a cup of stew. You would, if it was the right cup of stew. I would, if it was the right cup of stew. See, it's so easy to look at this and see that this couldn't possibly be true because it's so dramatic. But we've done it. You've watched it be done. You've watched people trade marriages for a cup of stew. You've watched people trade the respect of their kids for a cup of stew. You watch people trade 30 or 40 years of dedication to a field for a cup of stew. You've watched people trade incredible resource for a cup of stew. We're all susceptible to it. It all just is based upon it has to be the right cup of stew. And see, what Jacob and Esau taps into here is how incredibly powerful your appetite is. That it cannot be satisfied, and that if you're not careful and you don't step into the tension of it, it will ruin you. Whether it drives you forward in positive or negative ways has everything to do with how you go about framing your appetite. Listen to the next thing. Look, I'm about to die, Esau said. What good is a birthright to me? Like, okay, Esau, you're not about to die. You just walked into camp. I know you've been making fun of me my whole life. I know you're asking for stew. You might have low blood sugar. You might be a little dehydrated. You might be a little uncomfortable, but this isn't how people die of starvation. But doesn't it in many ways reflect how vulnerable we all are? When our appetites get churning and they get hungry and they get focused and we become like obsessed with a particular thing. Like, isn't this what happens when you suddenly want something? And you know how, I don't know if I'm the only one that does this. I'm going to guess that I'm not. But do you ever have, like, your appetite wants something, and then it appeals to your rational side, and it says, hey, brain, like, I really want this. Could you help me craft that argument? Because I'm going to have to present this to myself, and I'm going to have to convince myself to do it. And so, like, would you make the argument for me? I have a friend who's done more marriage counseling than anybody I know, probably many people in the whole state and Northwest, and he says this: nobody cheats on their spouse without killing them first. What he means is, you can't say yes to that appetite until you build a good case for why it's just, for why it's okay. Now, scientists and psychologists, they've been studying this, I'm assuming forever, but more recently they've coined a couple phrases that kind of capture the brain chemistry of all this, because what happens, what you're feeling, is actually very real to your physiology. They use two phrases, and of course this is what Esau was feeling. The first is called impact bias. And what happens here when your appetite it's at full tilt, I mean, it is going and it is churning and it wants and it's not going to take no for an answer, is your brain lies to you. What your brain tells you is that if you get this, if you get them, if you get that job, if you attain that level of status, if you own that iPad, it's going to feel like a 7. When in fact, it's only going to feel like a 2. What your brain tells you, like the chemistry of your brain, is that if you get that, you'll be satisfied forever. When in fact, you'll be satisfied for about as long as it takes to have the experience. See, an impact buy, like this is why we have buyer's remorse. because it's your brain telling you that something's going to feel far. This is why we have credit card debt. This is why we have so many of those ills. And see, this isn't like you're bad. It's you're human. It's a tension to be managed. The other one is called focalism. And where focalism is a little bit different is focalism hits on the psychological reality where everything else in life blurs. And suddenly the only thing you want is that one thing. Suddenly nothing else matters. Who cares that you spent 20 years building it? Who cares that that's been an incredible marriage for 30 years? Who cares that you worked so hard to get that job, that you've worked so hard to build that reputation, that you have so much respect of your peers? Who cares about any of that? Because suddenly all that matters is that one thing. And see, this is what Esau's dealing with. And listen to the way the story continues. But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob for a cup of stew. Who would do that? And isn't this the part in the story where you wish you could drop in on Esau? Where you wish you could or I could or someone could drop in on him and go, hold on here, Esau. Like, could we just pause? Let me tell you a story, Esau. You're going to have a few more sons. You got a few now. You're going to have a bunch more. In fact, you're going to have 12 sons, Esau. And those 12 sons are going to be blessed with incredible physical health, and those 12 sons are going to grow into 12 families. And those 12 families are eventually going to end up in this great empire called Egypt, and actually one of those sons is going to become in charge of that empire. Like, he'll be the second only to the kind of puppet leader guy, and he'll be in charge of the whole deal, and those 12 sons who become a nation inside of Egypt will become such a powerful, populated nation that they'll become a threat to this nation, and they'll actually become a slave state in that nation. And then what's going to happen is they're going to cry out to God. For 400 years they're going to be there, and towards the end they're going to start crying out to God to send them a deliverer. And God is going to raise up a guy named Moses. And let me tell you, Esau, hold on. Esau, let me tell you how God's going to introduce himself to Moses. He's going to say, "Moses, I'm God." Well, let me clarify. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. And Esau's going to go, "Wow, didn't know that. Holy cow, there's a lot of future in this." Hold on, Esau, it gets even better. Let me tell you, because 2,000 years later, God is going to do something even better. He's going to send his son in the flesh, fully God, fully human, and he's going to come and he's going to be a deliverer, a savior. He's going to get rid of the bloody altar. He's going to be the bloody altar. And while he's walking on the planet, he's going to develop some followers. And those followers, one of them, their name is going to be Matthew. And Matthew, he's going to write a story about Jesus. And that story will become like a bestseller within a bestseller. I mean, it'll be translated into every language on the planet. And listen, Esau, to how Matthew's going to start his story. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Esau. And Esau's going to go, "Wow, I had no idea. Had no idea how big the implications was." And see, the thing is, like, Esau, do you really want to trade all that for a bowl of stew? Of course not. But the trick is, nobody dropped in on Esau. And I think what we all know is no one's going to drop in on you either. Like, in those moments, it's going to be you and God and a decision to be made. I was a part of the church 10 years ago, what were called accountability groups were all the rave, and I still have respect for people who are a part of those. But the idea was that you get a group of guys or you get a group of women together, and they kind of nitpick each other, or that kind of just gave my opinion there, didn't I? But the idea was that they would walk with one another and keep one another safe. And everybody in here who is aware of that phenomenon could point to a good friend who was in an accountability group who had an affair. It just blows my mind. Why? Because it's not going to be about that. It's going to be about in the moment. No one's dropping in on you. You'll have a decision to be made. And see, the thing is this is one of those areas in life where there's a tension. Like, God made you with appetites. To not have appetites is to go to a certain death. But you'll have to manage them. And whether your appetite is to serve people in Africa, or to set your kids up for success, or to have a great family, or to make money, or to go skiing and have these experiences, whatever it is, you will have to manage it knowing that sin distorts them. And even more so, no matter how good it is, it'll never be fully satisfied, that you'll always live with that desire for more. And thus, I think That based upon research and some of the stuff I've been running into, that one of the only ways that you can manage this is to frame your appetite. To have a really developed, really succinct, the more clear the frame is, the more helpful it will be to have a really clear understanding of where you're headed, of what kind of family you want, of what kind of things God whispered to you when you first started following Jesus, of what kind of things caused you to start pursuing God and coming to church, of what kind of goals you had for yourself when you were a sophomore in high school, about who you wanted to be and what you wanted your reputation to be and what you wanted your influence to be. See, here's my challenge for you, or you might call it homework, is that sometime today or sometime tomorrow or certainly sometime this week, and I really hope this is one of those things where we don't just get together and have motivational moments and then move on, but I really hope you'll do this, that you'll start a Word document, or you'll grab a piece of paper, or you'll open your journal, and you'll write across the top of it, 10 years from now, ... 10 years from now. 10 years from now, what do you want to see God do with your life? 10 years from now, what do you want to see God accomplish through your business, through your organization? 10 years from now, what do you want to be your kids' reality? How do you want them to view you? 10 years from now, what kind of influence do you want to have in your church and in your community? 10 years from now, what do you want to be your everyday reality? And you write that at the top of the page, and you just start writing. And again, the more developed it is, the more appropriately it will serve you. Because had Esau taken the time to go, okay, wait a minute. Like, this is a really, really uncomfortable moment. But I'm about to trade, like, not just decades of my own life, not just my own future, but my kids' future and my grandkids' future and my great-grandkids' future. Some of you had this moment when you started following Jesus where there was this strong conviction that you were going to turn the family line, that things were going to be different to be a part of your tribe. Those are the types of things you have to keep in perspective. But what if you were to take the time and begin to articulate, here's my appetite, big picture, here's what I'm after. And you use that in those moments where your appetite is otherwise out of control, where focalism sets in, where impact bias is lying to you and tricking you. And let me ask you one more question, and then I'll leave you alone. What's your cup of stew? See, for some of you in a room this size, in a community this big, we're not just talking about an exercise and some future temptation. We're talking about now. Like, what's the thing in front of you? And you're taking it seriously, and you're contemplating it hard, and you very much are contemplating now versus your future. Maybe it's not even immoral. Maybe it's not illegal, but it just defies everything God would ask of you. Maybe there's a relationship, and it's not turned into anything yet, but it's headed there. Maybe there's a habit. What thing would you never want your spouse to find out about? That's your cup of stew. I was talking recently with someone, and they'd shared pretty candidly that they got this close to an affair, and it was emotional. It never got physical, and they were connecting together a lot, and they were really connected in a friendship level. And as they were sharing all the details of that, and it kind of came in several different instances, several interactions, ultimately what they shared was that they came to realize what was about to happen. And so they just said to the person, sorry, this friendship's over. It has to be. And I looked at them and I said, wow, I mean, I just tried to affirm, like, that's a ton of self-control. Pretty miserable in your marriage, got this promising thing developing, that's a pretty rare person that just goes, okay, done. And they, without my even asking how or what was the inspiration, they said, well, it was really obvious to me. Like, I could see what was happening. And I understood what was going to happen to my kids' perspective of me for the rest of their lives. And I understood what impact that was going to have on my family forever. And so I was able to step away. And at the risk of giving you too much detail, I mean, they framed their appetite. And they put it in that perspective. What if you were to take the time to frame yours? Because you know something? The desire for stuff and sex and more sex and money and more money and responsibility and to win in the organization and to get the level of advancement, it's never going to go away. And finally, let me finish here. Every one of us has the opportunity, because to walk out of this door this morning either angry or even worse, shamed or motivated. Listen, I understand that this is kind of the opposite of a message that you might want to hear if this is the first time you step into church for a while. And what I think is imperative is that you understand that God is not a God of shame. Like, every hero in the Bible is a reluctant hero. Every hero in the Bible is a pathetic hero. Brokenness is a part of everyone's story. God's interest is not to get you to wallow in the past. Because listen, every one of us here we could go like, well, I already ate the stew. Not only have I ate it, I've ate it like every day of my life for my whole life. I get that. But you have a choice to make. Will you walk out focused on that? Or will you believe a God who, the image of salvation in the Bible is so often that he picks things up out of the dirt and cleans them up and restores them to his purpose? That's his desire for you. And as you dream about God and what he wants to do through you and with you, that's where you get the chance to reframe your appetite. That's why Jesus rose from the dead, to bring new life and make it possible for all of us when we acknowledge that that's what he was about. So will you frame your appetite? And will you continue to keep it reframed?
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.